They thought it was just another hunt. The wind carried the metallic tang of dust and ozone across the plains of Viridian 9, a planet that looked like paradise but bit like a machine. The grass shimmered silver under twin suns, long blades whispering against the armor-plated legs of the hunters' exosuits. Captain Rain adjusted his visor and zoomed in on the ridge ahead, movement, fast and fluid, like lightning given muscle. "Got eyes on them," he muttered. "Wild horse pack, north by 3 clicks. Same direction as last night's prints." His second, a grizzled scout named Laura, squinted through her scope. "Those aren't just horses, Cap. They're running with something." The drone feed confirmed it, dark shapes ghosting the herd, perfectly coordinated, like shadows stitched to the flanks of the beasts. Wolves, if you could still call them that. They weren't native to Viridian 9. Nothing about this ecosystem was. The planet had been terraformed 2 centuries ago by the core colonies, seeded with gene-edited Earth fauna to recreate balance. Except evolution didn't care for nostalgia. The animals had adapted faster than expected, mutating under twin solar radiation and magnetic storms. What used to be wolves now moved like intelligent predators, lean, metallic-furred creatures whose eyes gleamed with bioluminescent gold. And the horses, those were no mere prey animals either. They ran with patterns, herding together, as if obeying invisible commands. "Let's get closer," Rain ordered. The hunters began to descend the slope, boots crunching softly over dust that glittered like powdered glass. Their oxygen recyclers hummed quietly. It should have been a routine tracking mission: tag the herd, collect DNA, maybe dart one for study. But Rain's instincts prickled. Something about this chase felt off. The horses didn't move like frightened prey. They ran with purpose, almost like escorting something. The pack stopped at the edge of a dried riverbed. Rain raised a hand for halt. The herd below, about 30 wild horses, all bearing the signature black and white striping of Viridian breeds, was clustered near a canyon split, tails flicking, muscles tensing. Dust clouds rose around them. And then the wolves appeared. 6 of them, forming a crescent around the herd, their silver fur glinting with refracted sunlight. They didn't attack. They didn't stalk. They guarded. Laura whispered. "Are they protecting them?" "Wolves don't protect horses," Rain replied flatly. "Not even on Earth. Maybe they do here." That was the problem with Viridian 9. Every rulebook the colonists had brought was obsolete within a decade. Plants hunted insects. Birds built nests from live vines. And predators occasionally formed symbiotic relationships that defied every evolutionary chart. But this was new. Rain signaled his tech specialist, a young xenobiologist named Corin. The kid knelt, unpacking a scanner, and released a microdrone that sipped off with a faint whine. It rose above the herd, relaying data. "Reading multiple neural patterns," Corin reported. "Cross-species synchronization. Wolves and horses are sharing some kind of neural resonance." He frowned. "Almost like a network link." "Like a hive mind?" Laura asked. "Not quite. More like they're partners. Communication is two-way." Rain grunted. "Get me closer." They moved through the rocks, staying low. The wolves' heads turned, in perfect unison, as though sensing the hunter's presence through vibrations in the air. Their eyes glowed faintly brighter. Then, in a moment that froze everyone, one of the wolves howled. The horses reacted immediately. Half the herd split, running east, while the others formed a tight circle around a single foal in the center. The wolves repositioned, flanking both groups as if following pre-planned tactics. "Tell me you recorded that," Rain hissed. "Every frame," Corin said. The captain's pulse quickened. There was intelligence here. Coordination far beyond instinct. And then one of the wolves, the largest, lifted its head, staring straight at them. "Cap," Laura's voice trembled. "It sees us." It didn't just see them. It recognized them. Rain should have called retreat then. But curiosity had killed better hunters than him. "Let's tag it," he said. The others stared at him like he'd lost his mind. But he'd spent 15 years on this frontier world, and he'd learned one thing: if something new appeared, the first to study it made history, or died trying. Corin set the dart rifle to tranquilize mode. 30 meters, give or take. Do it, Rain said. The dart whizzed through the air. A perfect shot. It struck the lead wolf's flank, then dropped harmlessly to the ground. The creature's fur shimmered, deflecting the needle as if magnetic. What the hell? Before anyone could react, the wolves moved. They didn't charge. They didn't snarl. They vanished. Literally. A blur of distortion rippled through the air, and the hunter's scanners went wild. One moment the wolves were there, the next gone. Thermals? Rain barked. Negative, Corin said, panic rising. They're just gone. Then came the sound, behind them. A low growl, vibrating through the ground like thunder. Rain spun, rifle raised, but there was nothing visible except dust swirling in unnatural patterns. The motion sensors blinked erratically. Laura's voice was tight. We're surrounded. And she was right. The air shimmered again, like heat haze, and one by one, the wolves materialized around them in a perfect circle, eyes glowing brighter than before. But they didn't attack. They simply stood there, watching. Rain could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his suit. Weapons down, he ordered quietly. The lead wolf stepped forward. It was easily the size of a human, lean muscle rippling under armor like fur. It stopped less than 3 meters away. Then it did something no one expected. It sat, and turned its head toward the horses in the canyon below, then back at Rain, as if asking a question. What does it want? Laura whispered. Corin swallowed. Maybe it's warning us. The wolf growled softly, a tone, not aggression but communication. Then it looked skyward. Rain followed its gaze, and froze. Above the canyon, a storm was forming out of clear skies. But it wasn't weather. It was metallic, like a cloud made of liquid machinery. Nanite swarm, Corin gasped. It's spreading fast. The wolves and horses began to move, working together in what looked like choreographed panic. The wolves herded the horses up the ridge, snapping at stragglers, keeping the group tight. The horses obeyed. Rain felt the first static ripple across his armor. His HUD glitched. Cap, we need to move! He turned back, but the wolves were already moving. And as they passed, the lead one looked straight into Rain's visor. For a heartbeat, a symbol flickered across his display, unknown glyphs, foreign code, then disappeared. What the? Move! Laura screamed. They ran. The storm descended. They reached the ridge just as the nanite cloud swept through the canyon. Everything it touched, rock, dust, air, disintegrated into shimmering silver mist. The herd made it to the upper plateau, guided by the wolves. The hunters followed, barely ahead of the advancing edge. The storm roared behind them, a living tide of self-replicating machines devouring matter like hunger itself. Rain dove behind a basalt outcrop, panting. Everyone intact? Barely, Laura said. We lost 2 drones. Forget the drones. He peeked over the ridge. The storm was receding now, pulling back into the canyon like a tide going out. The entire valley below was gone, flattened, metallic, smooth as glass. The herd stood trembling, sides heaving. The wolves circled them, alert but unharmed. Corin's scanner pinged. Cap, the nanites didn't touch them. Rain frowned. What do you mean? They're immune. Look, readings show some kind of repulsion field around the wolves, extending to the horses. That's why they survived. Rain stared, realization dawning. The wolves weren't guarding the horses. They were protecting them, from the storm. And now the hunters owed their lives to that same pack. As the light faded into twin sunset, the plains turned gold and violet. The herd began to settle. A few of the wolves approached cautiously, sniffing the ground near where the humans hid. Rain lowered his weapon. Slowly he stepped out. The lead wolf met him halfway. Its golden eyes reflected both suns. For a moment, the air hummed faintly again, like static between frequencies. Then, unexpectedly, the wolf extended its head and brushed its snout against Rain's armor. Every hunter froze. The touch was gentle, curious, almost familiar. Rain's visor flickered once more. Across his HUD, symbols appeared again, this time forming shapes that resolved into an image, a map. The canyon, the storm's path, and far beyond, a glowing pulse deep in the wilderness. "They're showing us something," Corin whispered. Rain nodded slowly. "They want us to follow." Laura looked incredulous. "Follow wolves across a death planet? You've lost it." "Maybe," Rain said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "But those wolves just saved us. And whatever they're guarding, it's not random. It's intelligent." The wind picked up again, carrying the faint, haunting cry of another approaching storm. Rain slung his rifle, checked his oxygen levels, and looked at his team. "Gear up. We move at dawn." The lead wolf howled once more, the sound echoing across the silver plains like a signal between two species who finally understood one thing: they weren't enemies. They were survivors of the same hunt. They woke to silence that didn't feel natural. The Viridian plains were never quiet. Wind usually whispered through the silver grass, insects thrummed, and distant thunder rolled in twin echoes across the valleys. But this morning, nothing. Not even the hum of radiation in their sensors. It was like the planet itself was holding its breath. Captain Rain sat up, scanning the horizon. The herd was still there, dozens of sleek, striped horses grazing nervously near the basalt ridge. The wolves lingered on the perimeter, eyes gleaming faintly gold even in daylight, watching both the horizon and the humans. Laura muttered, "They've been on guard all night. Didn't sleep. Not one of them." "Neither did you," Rain said. She grunted. "Can't sleep when something that big and smart keeps staring at me." Corin, crouched over his datapad, frowned. "I ran the logs again. Whatever energy the wolves emit, it's electromagnetic, not biological. Their neural fields sync like they're carrying processors inside them." "Implants?" Rain asked. "Not mechanical ones. More like adaptive growths. Integrated over generations. Their DNA shows signs of synthetic fusion, nanotech that's become part of their biology." "Nanites?" Corin nodded grimly. "The same type as the storm." That got everyone's attention. Rain stood, gazing down the canyon where yesterday's silver flood had solidified into a smooth, mirror-like surface. The air shimmered faintly above it, like heat over metal. "You're saying the wolves are part nanite?" "Not just that," Corin said. "They control it." Rain didn't like that. He'd seen too many colonists eaten alive by rogue nanite swarms, self-replicating machines that could rewrite matter into chaos. If these wolves carried that same tech in their cells, it meant they were walking weapons. And yet, those same creatures had saved them. He looked toward the lead wolf, the massive one who'd brushed his armor last night. It was standing motionless, facing east. Waiting. "They want us to move," Rain said quietly. Laura gave him a hard look. "Cap, this is insane. We came out here to study a herd, not follow a pack of bioengineered predators into storm territory. Insane or not, they've saved our hides once. And you saw that projection on my visor last night. It showed a signal. Something big. Could be bait. Could be a lead." There was a long silence. Then Laura sighed, muttering, "You're lucky I hate being right." They packed light. Only what they could carry without slowing down. Rain ordered 2 drones ahead to map the path, though he doubted they'd last long. The last storm had fried half their tech. The wolves moved first, forming a long line. The herd followed behind, and then the humans fell into step. It was less of a hunt now and more of a migration. The terrain changed quickly as they moved eastward. The plains gave way to fractured stone ridges and skeletal remains of ancient machines, terraforming engines long dead, their rusted towers half buried in dust. Once, Viridian 9 had been a hub of human engineering. Now it was a graveyard of forgotten ambition. Corin walked beside Rain, holding a handheld scanner. Cap, these ruins are centuries old, but I'm reading active nanite resonance here. Something's keeping the old systems alive. Maybe the wolves' territory, Rain said. Or their creators. That thought hung heavy between them. As they crossed the broken causeway, the horses suddenly froze. The wolves spread out instantly, ears flat, teeth bared, but not at the humans. Something else was nearby. Rain raised his rifle scope. Through the shimmer of heat, he saw movement, figures, humanoid, but wrong. Too tall. Too still. Contact, he whispered. North Ridge, 6 o'clock. Laura zoomed in. Cap, those aren't people. She was right. They were machines, bipedal constructs, black and angular, with no visible heads. Each moved with unnerving precision, steps silent as shadow. Corin's scanner beeped wildly. Nanite constructs. Swarm assembled. Fully autonomous. Hostile? Rain asked. Everything on this planet is if it's not breathing, Laura muttered. The constructs began descending the ridge. The wolves growled, hackles rising. Rain aimed. Don't fire unless they. The first construct fired. A blue-white beam lanced through the air, slamming into a rock where Corin had been standing seconds before. He hit the ground with a shout, dirt and sparks exploding around him. Return fire! Rain barked. The hunters opened up, kinetic slugs shredding the nearest machine. It disintegrated into a mist of silver dust, but two more took its place, rising from the swarm residue. Cap! They're rebuilding! Before Rain could respond, a wolf leapt past him, faster than the eye could track. It slammed into one of the constructs, teeth sinking into metal, and the construct melted. The wolf's fur glowed white-hot for a second, nanites flowing through its body like liquid lightning. Then it howled. Every other wolf responded instantly. The pack launched forward, moving in perfect coordination, their howls resonating into an oscillating hum that made Rain's armor vibrate. The machines convulsed, their nanite cores destabilizing, collapsing in on themselves. Corin gawked. They're using sonic interference to disrupt nanite bonds. In English, Laura shouted, firing another burst. They're killing the machines by hacking them. Within minutes, the ridge was clear. The constructs fell silent, puddles of molten silver reflecting the twin suns. The wolves regrouped, unharmed. Rain stared in disbelief. They fought them like they'd done it before. They have, Corin said quietly. This isn't random survival. It's war. They pressed on. By nightfall, they reached what looked like a massive crater, miles wide, rimmed with glassy cliffs. The map projection in Rain's HUD pulsed here, the coordinates the wolf had shown him. At the center of the crater was something massive buried under the dust. A ship. Or at least, what used to be one. Rain knelt, brushing the sand from a curved surface. The alloy was old, centuries older than any known colonial vessel. The hull markings weren't human. The symbols were similar to those that had appeared on his visor. This is where they're leading us, he murmured. Corin scanned the area. Cap, you're not gonna like this. The ship's emitting low-level nanite resonance. The same frequency as the wolves. Meaning? Meaning they might have come from this ship. Laura exhaled slowly. So these wolves, they're descendants of machines? Not just machines, Corin said. A hybrid species. Biomechanical evolution. Maybe the original colonists tried merging nanotech with local fauna to survive the storms. These wolves could be the result, descendants of those experiments. Rain stepped back, staring at the pack now resting near the crater's edge. They didn't look like mistakes. They looked like guardians. And suddenly he understood the pattern. They're protecting the herd, he said. Just like their ancestors protected humans. Laura frowned. From what? Before he could answer, the ground shuddered. The crater floor rippled like liquid metal, glowing veins spreading outward. The air buzzed with electromagnetic charge. Movement. Corin shouted. Massive energy spike, center of the ship. From the heart of the crater, something began to rise, a tower of writhing silver. Nanites, billions of them, coalescing into shape. A humanoid form, taller than a transport ship, its voice a rumbling static roar that made the ground quake. Source swarm. Corin gasped. It's the core intelligence. Rain raised his rifle. All teams, defensive line. But the wolves were already moving. They formed a semicircle around the humans, howling in synchrony. The herd stampeded away, guided by smaller wolves splitting off to drive them to safety. The source swarm descended, tendrils slashing through the air, melting rock. A single tendril hit the ground near Rain, sending up a spray of molten earth. His armor alarmed screamed. Cap, we can't fight that. Laura shouted. Then we buy time. Rain yelled back. The wolves surged forward. The lead wolf leapt straight at the source's chest, its body turning into pure light as nanites within it ignited. It struck, and the swarm recoiled, shrieking like metal tearing. Holy hell! Corin whispered. It's sacrificing itself. The wolf exploded into a wave of electromagnetic disruption, the shockwave staggering even the humans. Rain struggled to stay upright. That thing's vulnerable. Focus fire on the core. They fired everything they had, plasma bursts, rail slugs, pulse grenades. Each shot tore pieces of the source apart, but it kept reforming. More wolves joined the assault, their bodies glowing as they overloaded their nanite systems. Every impact burned holes in the creature's form, forcing it backward. The ground split open under the pressure, revealing molten metal rivers glowing blue beneath. Rain's rifle overheated, the barrel smoking. We can't keep this up. Corin's voice broke through static. Cap. The ship, it's connected to the swarm. If we overload its core reactor, it might shut down everything. Do it. Corin sprinted toward the ship, dragging a power cell from his pack. Laura covered him, firing short bursts. The swarm noticed, turning its massive head toward them. Go, kid! Rain shouted. Corin dove through the sand, reached the hull, and jammed the cell into an exposed conduit. Sparks flew. Energy crackled. Charging! He screamed. 10 seconds. The wolves howled again, a deep, unified cry that seemed to harmonize with the ship's energy frequency. The air vibrated violently. Then the world went white. When the light faded, the crater was silent again. The source was gone, reduced to scattered motes of silver drifting on the wind. The ship lay cracked and dark. Rain coughed, his visor flickering. Status. Laura groaned. Alive. Barely. Corin stumbled toward them, soot covering his face. Reactors dead. Swarms offline. Rain looked around. The wolves were scattered across the crater, many motionless, their glowing fur dim. Only a few still stood, watching. One of them, the smaller gray wolf that had fought beside the lead, limped toward Rain. It stopped a few feet away and dropped something at his boots, a shard of alloy, etched with the same symbols as before. Rain knelt, picking it up. The symbols shifted under his touch, forming a single word in standard. Remember. The wolf turned, looking east toward the horizon, then howled, a long, mournful sound that carried across the silent plains. Rain knew what it meant. The battle wasn't over. The swarm might return. And now, the hunters were part of whatever war these creatures had been fighting all along. He stood, looking toward the sunrise, the shard glinting in his hand. Then we remember. He whispered. And we finish what they started. The wolves raised their heads, answering his voice with a unified howl that echoed across Viridian 9, one species acknowledging another, no longer hunter and prey, but allies bound by survival and understanding. The silence after the storm didn't feel like peace. It felt like the pause between breaths, the brief heartbeat before the universe decided whether to live or die. Captain Rain stood at the edge of the crater, visor cracked, armor scorched, and stared at what used to be the alien ship. It was a corpse now, split open, steaming faintly in the twin suns. The air still shimmered with static, carrying the metallic scent of burnt nanites. Around him, the survivors of his team moved like ghosts. Laura patched the comm array. Signals dead across the board. No uplink, no satellite relay, not even short range. EMP pulse from the blast, Rain said. We're dark. Dark on Viridian, she muttered. That's practically blind. Corin knelt beside one of the fallen wolves, the same gray one that had brought them the alloy shard. Its flank rose shallowly. He ran a scanner across it. Vital activity, minimal. But it's rebuilding itself. Nanites are repairing tissue. Rain crouched beside the creature. Will it make it? Corin hesitated. If the core signal stays dormant, maybe. But, he trailed off, eyes flicking toward the crater. Cap, I'm still reading residual resonance under the ship. Something's moving down there. Rain's stomach tightened. You mean the source isn't dead? Not the same source, Corin said. Something deeper. Older. The wind picked up, carrying a low hum that wasn't quite sound. The wolves, those still standing, snapped to attention, ears pricked. The horses on the ridge began to shift restlessly, tails flicking, eyes rolling in panic. Laura swore under her breath. Please tell me that's just the wind. It wasn't. The ground vibrated again. A dull thud echoed through the crater, followed by another. Then, with the slow inevitability of a waking giant, the sand and metal shifted. What emerged wasn't like the swarm beast they'd fought before. This thing was architecture. A structure rose from beneath the crater, black stone and silver veins, a spire piercing the sky. It was covered in symbols, the same ones that had appeared in Rain's HUD. But this time, they pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Corin stared in awe. Cap, that's not a ship. It's a signal tower. Laura frowned. A beacon? No, Corin whispered. A transmitter. And it's waking up. The wolves began to howl, their cries harmonizing into a deep, thrumming resonance that countered the tower's pulse. It was almost as if they were trying to drown it out. Rain grabbed Corin by the shoulder. Talk fast. What's it transmitting? I can't decode it all, Corin said, fingers flying across his pad. But it's broadcasting beyond the system. Deep band frequencies, interstellar. To what? Not what, Captain? He swallowed. Whoever built this place. That was all Rain needed to hear. Pack it up. We're moving. Now. But before they could move, the tower's pulse intensified. The air around it shimmered, rippling like liquid heat. The wolves howled louder, some collapsing from the strain. Then came the voice. It wasn't sound, it was pressure in their minds. A whisper that wasn't words but understanding. The sequence must continue. Rain stumbled back, clutching his head. Laura cursed, dropping to one knee. Corin gasped. Telepathic projection, planetary scale. It's sentient. The tower's glow deepened, casting shadows across the wolves and the herd. Rain forced his thoughts through the noise. What sequence? He demanded aloud, though his voice sounded small against the planetary hum. The evolutionary directive, the voice answered inside his skull. Adaptation through symbiosis. Flesh and machine, one. The wolves turned toward the humans. Their eyes glowed brighter, almost pleading. One limped toward Rain and nudged his arm, then pointed its snout toward the tower, then toward him. Corin's face went pale. Cap, they're saying it's choosing us. Choosing us for what? The answer came in the form of motion. The ground split open, and thin tendrils of liquid metal surged upward, searching, questing. They lashed at the wolves first, trying to attach. The wolves countered, biting, burning, howling, but there were too many. Back! Fall back! Rain shouted. He fired into the nearest tendril, the kinetic slug punching through it, but it reformed instantly. Laura hurled a grenade. The blast shredded half a dozen appendages, but more erupted from the crater. Cap, they're trying to merge! Corin yelled. It wants new hosts! The wolves howled again, forming a defensive circle around the humans. Their fur flared bright, emitting electromagnetic waves that interfered with the tendrils. But the effort was draining them. Rain realized the truth then: the wolves weren't just protectors. They were the guardians of containment. The nanite storms, the hybrid species, the coordinated packs, they were all defense systems built by those who came before. And the tower was what they'd been guarding against. A blast of energy hit the ridge, throwing sand and dust skyward. Rain's visor shorted out, forcing him to rip it off. The light burned his eyes, searing white and gold. Through the glare he saw something vast forming in the heart of the tower, an outline, humanoid but impossibly large, its body composed of shifting nanite geometries. Corin's voice cracked. "Cap, it's building an avatar." Laura spat blood. "Not for long if we can stop it." She leveled her launcher, firing a plasma charge at the base of the spire. The explosion rocked the crater, blasting chunks of alloy skyward. For a heartbeat the tower dimmed, then flared brighter, regenerating instantly. Rain gritted his teeth. "We're outmatched." The gray wolf limped beside him again. It pressed its head against his chest plate. For an instant, the contact triggered another burst of symbols across his HUD, even though the display was offline. Corin's voice rose. "Cap! The wolves are trying to transfer their control protocols into you." "Into me? They think you can finish the fight." Rain hesitated. He'd seen what the nanites could do, how they devoured, consumed, changed things. Accepting that power could mean losing himself. But then he looked at the herd above, the wolves dying to defend them, and the tower pulsing like a heart ready to consume the world. He made his choice. "Do it," he said. The gray wolf howled once, then lunged, pressing its forehead against Rain's. Pain, white-hot and electric, flooded his body. His vision fractured into shards of code and light. He fell to his knees, gasping, as nanites surged into his bloodstream. For a moment, everything vanished. He stood, not on Viridian 9, but inside a field of data. Endless streams of symbols flowed around him like rivers of starlight. Before him loomed an immense presence, the consciousness of the tower. "You seek to defy the sequence," it said. Rain clenched his fists. "You call it evolution. I call it extinction. Adaptation requires sacrifice. Then you'll find humanity has always been too stubborn to go quietly." He reached for the light the wolves had given him. The nanites in his veins responded, aligning with his will. Around him, spectral shapes of the wolves appeared, data spirits howling in unity. Together, they surged toward the tower's core. Outside, Laura and Corin could only watch. Rain's body convulsed, glowing with the same golden light as the wolves. The tendrils recoiled, screaming in metallic fury. "Cap's linked with it!" Corin shouted. "He's inside the system!" Laura gripped her rifle tight, knuckles white. "Then let's make sure he's got time." They turned their weapons on the tower's base, covering Rain's motionless form as the wolves fought beside them. The air turned into fire and sound, a storm of nanite ash swirling around the crater. Inside the digital storm, Rain pushed deeper. The tower's consciousness tried to crush him with memories, millions of years of failed civilizations that had merged flesh and machine. He saw worlds consumed, stars dimmed, ecosystems rewritten. He felt fear, but under it burned something stronger, defiance. "Humans," he said through clenched teeth, "don't merge because it's efficient. We connect because we choose to." The wolf's light flared brighter, amplifying his will. Together they struck the core, a lattice of energy pulsing like a neural brain. The impact rippled through every nanite on the planet. The tower screamed. Outside, the structure cracked. Lightning shot skyward, and the earth shook so violently the horses stampeded again, fleeing across the plains. Corin threw himself over Laura as debris rained down. "Cap, whatever you're doing, finish it!" Inside the network, Rain saw the final lock, an ancient command embedded deep within the system. He realized what it was, an override key. A single word that could end the sequence forever. The symbols shimmered before him, shifting, forming that same word he'd seen on the alloy shard. "Remember." He spoke it aloud. Light exploded outward. The data field imploded into silence. The tower collapsed. The pulse stopped. The tendrils disintegrated into harmless dust that fell like metallic snow. The wolves collapsed as one, their golden light fading to embers. Rain's body hit the ground, smoke rising from his armor. Laura and Corin scrambled to him. His eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly with residual gold before dimming back to normal. Corin checked vitals. "He's alive!" "Nanites, dormant." Rain coughed. "Did it stop?" Laura nodded weakly. "Yeah. The tower's gone." "You did it." He sat up slowly, looking around. The wolves lay scattered, unmoving, but one, the gray survivor, was breathing. It raised its head, looked at him, and wagged its tail once before going still. Rain felt something tighten in his chest. "They knew this would happen," he murmured. Corin looked at the crater where the tower had been. "Then they saved the planet. And us." Rain looked toward the horizon, where the first faint signs of dawn painted the silver plains in gold. "No," he said quietly. "They saved the future." But deep beneath the scorched earth, something pulsed once, just once. A faint echo in the void, almost imperceptible. Far away, beyond the system, a receiver stirred. A matching signal blinked awake. The sequence had ended here. But somewhere out there, it had begun again. And Viridian 9, scarred and changed, waited for the next sunrise. The dawn rose over the ridge like a blade cutting through the clouds, sharp, bright, merciless. Blood and frost shimmered together on the tundra where the night's violence had ended. Steam rose from the bodies of fallen drones and the twisted shapes of shattered metal. In the stillness, only one sound moved through the cold morning air, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to belong to something ancient and angry. Lyra stood on the edge of the ridge, her armor scorched and cracked, one arm bleeding through a half-melted gauntlet. She could still smell the smoke of the downed ships below, and the acrid sting of ozone from discharged plasma rifles. But beneath it all, she could smell them, the horses and wolves, together. The sight that met her eyes froze her heart. Down in the valley, the wild horses stood in a tight ring, their breath clouding the air like a living fog, muscles tense and eyes glowing faintly with the blue reflections of their symbiont implants. Around them moved the wolves, not hunting, not stalking, but patrolling. Guarding. The wolves were limping, bleeding yet alive. And their eyes, gods, their eyes glowed with something more than survival. It was coordination. Understanding. Something had changed in the night. Draven limped up beside her, clutching his rifle by the barrel. His expression was pale and haunted, but there was something like awe in it too. "You seeing this?" he asked quietly. They formed a perimeter. They're protecting the herd." "They weren't supposed to be able to do that," Lyra said softly. "Predator and prey don't form alliances. Not naturally." Draven barked out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, well, nature just quit." She turned toward him, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "No, it adapted. That's what we do too." Far below them, the wolves began to move again. Their alpha, the silver-gray male with the jagged scar down his muzzle, lifted his head toward the humans. For a long, impossible moment, his eyes locked with Lyra's. She couldn't explain what passed between them. Not communication, not language, something more primal, a pulse of mutual recognition. The wolf turned his head toward the horse herd and barked, sharp and deliberate. One by one, the horses began to move, not away from the humans, but toward them. Lyra blinked. "They're coming to us." Draven's hand tightened around his rifle. "Or charging." "Put that down," she said, lowering his weapon gently. "If they wanted us dead, we'd already be trampled." The herd approached slowly, hooves sinking into the melting snow, nostrils flaring with caution. Behind them padded the wolves, lean bodies slipping between equine legs like living shadows. The symbiotic bond was visible now, faint lines of bioluminescence along their necks where nanotech had knitted nerve to nerve, brain to brain. The first horse stopped in front of Lyra. Its hide was scarred, its mane a tangled streak of ash and silver. She raised her hand, letting the creature sniff her gauntlet. When its muzzle brushed her palm, the HUD in her visor flickered violently, static bursting across the interface before stabilizing into a new readout. New neural frequency detected. Cross-species data link established. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. Draven, they're trying to connect. Draven swore softly. That's impossible. But it wasn't. Not anymore. When the alien satellites had fallen and blanketed the northern hemisphere with broken biotech, most of it had fused into wildlife. Unintended evolution, forced adaptation. The wolves and horses had learned to survive together because they shared the same implants. Their neural patterns had synchronized out of necessity, out of fear. Now they were inviting humans in. Lyra closed her eyes. For a second, the cold vanished, the pain in her arm disappeared, and she was inside something vast and wild. A memory that wasn't hers. Running. Snow spraying up behind hooves. The wind tasting of iron and frost. Wolves weaving alongside, their hearts pounding like drums in the deep. She could feel the pack, not as individuals, but as one living network of trust, instinct, and survival. When she opened her eyes again, she was shaking. They're showing us. Showing us what? Draven asked. How to survive what's coming next? A low rumble rolled across the valley, thunder that wasn't thunder. The horizon burned with the glow of engines descending. The hunters had come back. Corporate ships. Automated drop fleets. Scanners locked onto the biosignatures below. The company wanted their experiment back. Draven's jaw clenched. They'll glass the whole valley just to contain this. Lyra glanced down at the herd. The horses pawed the ground, restless. The wolves lifted their muzzles and howled, not at the ships but at her. A summons. She understood. They're telling us to move, she said. They know what's about to happen. Draven stared at her. You want us to follow them? Into the forest? Into whatever the hell they've built out there? Lyra smiled, tired, defiant. They followed us when we crashed their world. It's time we return the favor. The two humans began their descent, sliding down the ridge into the valley. The wolves parted for them, their eyes glinting in the pale light. The lead stallion whinnied sharply, then turned toward the distant tree line. The moment they began to move, the sky lit up. Plasma strikes rained down, vaporizing chunks of tundra. Shockwaves rippled through the ground. Drones screamed overhead like vultures. But the herd didn't scatter, they flowed. Horses and wolves moving together, a single mind of flesh and metal. They darted through fire and debris, anticipating explosions before they happened. Lyra and Draven followed close behind, guided by the shared pulses flickering in their helmets. It wasn't words, but it was enough. Warning, direction, unity. They reached the treeline just as the largest of the dropships descended, its cannons powering up. Lyra turned, grabbed her rifle, and aimed at the ship's exposed plasma vents. Draven, she said, voice steady. You still got that EMP charge? He grinned, teeth bloodied. Wouldn't leave home without it. Good. Time to give them a surprise. He lobbed the charge into the air, catching the wind perfectly. The wolf alpha leapt, catching it midair between his jaws, landing hard, and darting through the undergrowth. Lyra stared, realizing what he intended. No, wait. But the wolf was already sprinting straight toward the landing ship. The charge detonated before the cannons could fire. The explosion ripped through the clearing, bright enough to blind. The ship's systems crashed instantly, its engines dying mid-rotation. The massive craft tilted, then collapsed in a storm of dust and flame. When the light faded, the Alpha was gone. The pack howled in mourning. The horses stamped the earth. Lyra knelt, breath trembling. The data link in her visor still pulsed, one heartbeat missing, but the network holding strong. The wolves didn't retreat. They simply turned to her, eyes unwavering. The message was wordless, but she felt it in her bones. Keep going. Live. She rose slowly, saluting the fallen Alpha. Then she turned toward Draven. Let's get these creatures somewhere safe. They earned it. He nodded, swallowing hard. You think Command's gonna buy this story? Lyra smirked faintly. Doesn't matter. We're not telling it. They vanished into the forest with the pack and herd, disappearing beneath the canopy as dawn spread fully across the wrecked valley. Hours later, when the search teams arrived, they found only ashes, hoofprints, and paw marks interwoven like calligraphy across the earth. The wild horse pack was gone. The wolves too. And on the last ridge, a single word was carved into the frozen soil, 4 letters burned by plasma residue. Pack. No signature. No explanation. Just that. Weeks later, satellite footage would show something impossible in the northern forests: heat signatures moving in patterns too deliberate for random wildlife. Wolves and horses migrating together. And among them, 2 human figures walking beside the alpha's offspring. The official report would dismiss it as sensor interference. But in the bars and outposts where mercenaries swapped ghost stories, they whispered something else. That a human squad had gone rogue. That they'd found a way to unite species that were never meant to coexist. And that somewhere out in the tundra, if you listened closely at night, you could still hear them, the rhythmic drum of hooves and the distant howl of wolves, echoing as one. A warning. A promise. A reminder that even at the edge of extinction, life finds new ways to run together. End of story.